but it's our perception so becomes our reality. Like we see what we want to see. It's like we want to structure our thought process behind what we really want to believe. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can be really bad. Welcome to the Lionz Den, episode 45. My name's Eddy.
This is Brad.
And this is Alex.
Today we're going to talk about, and we actually touch on it on almost every episode, but how, and it's kind of funny because as much as I know this, it's a constant, you know, every other week is a reminder of how accurate it is and the constant struggle with it. And we'll delve into it in a couple different ways, but perception is your reality, you know, is what today's title is about. And seems super simple, and hey, your perception is your reality. Like, it's super easy to say. It's absolutely frightening, sometimes could be nightmarish how accurate that is. The world is really as you see it. And, you know, if you want to see bad out there, it's more than happy to show you. If you want to see good out there, it's more than happy to show you. If that friend that you have is a shithead, you'll see every reason why they are. If that friend out there is great, you're going to see every reason why they are. If your job sucks, you're going to see every reason why it does. If your job's great, you're going to see every reason why it does. If your marriage is shit, you're going to see every reason. It's freaking amazing. It's amazing. I would say for me personally, I've been on the ebbs and flows of that so many times that, so I know that it's not a news flash for me, and I really try to level myself and ground myself with being very open to, okay, is it really all that bad, or is it really all that good? You know, I kind of try to stay moderate, and I still get caught in it. Usually for me, it's, am I trying to convince myself of one or the other? So if, you know, things are bad and I'm trying to find the good in it, I'm like, are you just trying to convince yourself it's not that bad because this shit really sucks? And when things are really good, and when things are good, it's like I'm trying to find the bad. I just try to stay level. But am I denying myself, you know, the joy of that in that moment? You know, if that makes any sense, because don't get too high, because, you know, tomorrow could suck. I can say when I studied Buddhism, that was probably my biggest obstacle with it. So Buddhists want no part of that. You know, it's all yin and yang. There's good that comes with bad, and there's bad that comes with good, and that's just life. Deal with it. Stop attaching to it. Stop when things are good. Stop attaching to things are so great they can never be bad, because they will be. And when things are bad, don't attach to, oh my God, my life sucks and nothing ever good happens to me, because good things do happen to you. You know, for them, it really all comes down to ego and attachments. But that was probably my biggest struggle with that. And more so for me was more socially. You know, and what I mean by that is, and I want to be clear, you know, again, this is my interpretation of Buddhism. I'm not saying that's how every Buddhist is or any of that, because there's different people and there's different levels of it. But I really, especially at that time, considered myself an activist. You know, so I was doing a lot of stuff. So homelessness, I was working with a lot of homeless people. I was Big Brother. I was helping inner cities. I was doing tons and tons of volunteer work. You know, was doing everything I could which, you know, obviously Buddhism isn't against that. I'm not saying it is. But I found myself like being, well, you know, should you really be fighting against the way life is? There are people that are homeless. There are people that have a tough time, all that stuff. I guess I have this like warrior mentality, which, you know, ironically, the samurai, some of the greatest warriors that Earth has ever known, were traditionally Buddhists. So obviously they found the balance in it.
Sure.
You know, I had a hard time with it. Only because I'm so like regimented and committed. When I'm doing something, I'm doing it. So I had a hard time finding that balance. And when it comes to my perception, it's probably the thing nowadays I struggle the most with. And I'll also say that I struggle with who I want to be and the person I want to be, and, you know, who I am I wouldn't say inside, but that, you know, I still have an angry kid in me sometimes, and I still have a part of me that sees certain stuff and gets pissed off. Mm-hmm. You know, there's still a part of me that wants to slap the shit out of people when I see, especially bullying, people taking advantage of people hurting people, people overstepping their bounds with somebody because they know they can. You know, I still have a hard time with injustice. And like we were just talking about The Chosen, I watch Jesus and he still kind of manages all that and doesn't go there with it. So I always kind of struggle with that balance and with my perspective. You know, I mean, I don't know where you guys are at with perspective as being your reality.
For me, I have to tend to kind of remind myself a lot of where I was and where I'm at, because I have kind of been through it really throughout my whole life. There's ups and downs and good points and bad points, and I think when you kind of go through life like that, you're kind of always afraid, for lack of a better term, that, you know, whether the shoe's going to drop or, you know, like, and you're kind of, so there's things that I'm apprehensive of. And even as of late, my business is excelling. We're doing very good. I need to grow. And I for a very long time have really tried not to grow. I've tried to kind of hold everything in where I can control it. I keep it small and keep it contained, but it's just, I can't anymore. I need help. I need to hire people. I need to put trust in other people. It's very difficult for me to do. And that's the reality. I need to do that. And I need to just trust in the process that it's the right thing to do. And it's hard for me to do that. And I'm aware of that. So it's kind of, for me, there's always this like inner battle.
Sure.
You know, and and really it is how you view each thing. So for me, my perception reality is, it's always changing. It's always going back and forth. It's like a ping pong ball, and which I don't think is healthy, you know, but,
sure.
But that's kind of my inner, that's what happens with me. So when I feel it's good, I try and ride that good. And when I start to go down the rabbit hole of things kind of being bad, I try not to go too deep.
Sure.
In it. So,
Alex?
I think for me, I've got a pretty good grasp on perception versus reality. I try to focus on it. Like when I was coming through a lot of the stuff with you, when you were kind of mentoring me through a lot of my early struggles as I was kind of coming up through my growth, I learned to manage perception by explaining reality. I learned to do it with myself first, and then try to translate that to everything that I do, whether it be selling, manage customer perceptions, and then, you know, showing them the reality of it. I guess where I struggle the most with it. So you're probably the best. I don't, you know, you and I haven't seen a ton with, but I mean, Eddie, you're probably the best I've seen as far as being able to ride that middle wave, you know, like we use the analogy in sales, the hardest thing to do is to manage the ups and downs, because when the highs are high, they're high, when the lows are low, and it's riding that middle line. You're really good at it. I'm aware of it, but I still get trapped in the really highs and in the really lows. I think My biggest struggle with it all, though, is managing it from other people. So what I still struggle with is I'm pretty good about understanding when somebody says something, when they do something, that situation could have been perceived differently than I did. So I'm pretty understanding there. Where I struggle with it is, let's say you have a friendship, you have a relationship, whatever the case may be, something changes, a dynamic changes.
Sure.
I struggle when other people don't take the time to see how it could be perceived from the other end, because I'm so big into how they're perceiving my interaction. So what I mean is I try to be so aware of how I'm coming off, the things that I'm doing, the changes that I've made, how with that other person it may affect them because of how they may perceive it and how that situation's actually playing out. Now, communication, conversation kind of helps there because you can take that gray area out. Now, we know, though, a lot of people aren't great with that or don't have the time for it. Where I struggle as a person is managing the fact that it's not always the worst end scenario. And also, I get frustrated because I feel like people don't take the time to try to look at the perception of where I'm at, because I allow myself to do it. So I feel like other people kind of get off the hook in a way, because you don't have to explain to me, because I'm trying to see that side. I'm trying to understand your perception, but I get super, super hurt when that doesn't come in return. So when I feel like it's ride the line, everything's good there, that's where I struggle with. And I know better, because how do you solve that? By communicating, which is something I try to take pride in. It's just when that happens, I immediately turn into, well, shit, something went south, or it's always the negative side of it. And that's something I'm working on.
No, I mean, I think that anytime you're, a thoughtful, caring person where, everybody's different, living different lives. Some people are just trying to survive.
Right.
Some people are just trying to manage their lives. Some people want to live a fulfilled life. Some people want to live a happy life. Some people gave up on life, and, for me personally, just because of having so many interactions with so many people, it never ceases to make me feel or look dumb when I make some kind of assumption about somebody or something. God just seems to put in that place where, we were talking about Socrates a couple weeks ago, where you think and God's like, nah, you don't know shit. You thought this, but here's the reality of that. So because I've been humbled so many times in that, where, somebody will do something that I never thought they would, and you're like, oh, okay. Or the opposite, good and bad on that. I've been hurt by people that I thought would never hurt me, and then people have come, in my corner that I never thought would. And I've had so many exchanges with people, especially relationships where you're talking to one party and they see things one way. You talk to the other party, they see things completely different. And then when you're talking to each of those, they're like, they know that aggravates me when they do that, and they do it anyways because they're assholes. And then you talk to that other party and you're like, when you do that, you're being an asshole. You're like, what? Right. I didn't know. I had no idea that upset, whatever that person. That shit amazes me.
Yeah, sure.
So like the human dynamic, and again, especially for me, I'm just, and honestly, I've always been like that. I'm just a point in my life where I don't have time for bullshit. So I'm very forthright. I'm very open. I have no problem telling you exactly how I feel, exactly why I feel that way.
He's being truthful.
I have no problem telling you exactly the shit you just said, how it came across. Yeah. Like, I have no problem with any of that. And there's still different perceptions, within that dynamic. I've had recently with work where I'm taking something a certain way and being very blunt about it, and they're like, "What do you mean? How could you possibly take it that way?" I'm like, "Well, because of this, and that. What do you mean?
Sure.
I find that amazing. And we talked about a little bit on the last one of how the reality of Jesus is and what our perception of many people is and how the hell did you get from there to there. And I didn't want to break it in on that one because I knew the next podcast was going to be about this, but it's our perception so becomes our reality. Like we see what we want to see. Yeah. It's like we want to structure our thought process behind what we really want to believe. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can be really bad. An example of good is I think we've talked about in the past. It was a documentary, no arms, no legs, or I had, I think, one arm, and this dude's like scaling cliffs. Mm-hmm. Somebody told that guy, hey, bro, that shit's done. Mm-hmm. I love you, but you can't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. You're physically incapable of doing it. I know it's in your heart, but you just can't do that anymore. And that guy was like, kiss my ass. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it.
Right.
And there are loved ones, people that love that person, people that are in that corner that don't want to see you get hurt. So they're like, I support you, but it's just not realistic. And he's like, I'm doing it. What don't you understand?
Yeah.
In those cases, and there's plenty of them like that, where your personal perception is, I'm going to do it, is great. That being your reality, because a lot of times that's what strives us. Mm-hmm. That's why it's such an important conversation, because there's such that fine line of growth and destroying you. I think I just mentioned it, like a samurai sword. You're folding it and folding it and folding that metal over and over again to get that strength. And then you're right at that cusp where do it a couple more times and you ruined it. Now it's weak. That's kind of us as people. You're constantly being pushed into that, like you said earlier, shit, is this it for me? Mm-hmm. Like, am I at that breaking point? And to your point, even though I'm pretty good at balancing that, I still have those moments. Yeah. And for me, it's embarrassing to have those moments because I'm like, dude, how many times have you risen from the ashes? How many times have you come back from bad times? How many times has God shown you that he's got your back, it's going to work out, do the right thing, do the just act, and things will work out? And I still have those, like, I don't know, man. This might be it. There might be no coming back from this one. Yeah. And I feel horrible for even thinking that way, but your perception is your reality. When you get so caught up in all of that, you seem to lose focus. And again, I noticed that a real lot in relationships, and it could be couples, it could be friends, it's somebody does one bad thing and they're a complete asshole. Somebody does one good thing and they're the second coming of Jesus. And the reality is neither of those are true. Everybody's got a story to tell.
Well, and it's with relationships, there's habits. So the minute you break a habit, it's more common to assume that perception is fuck. Or shoot, things are going sideways, or I did something wrong, or whatever. It could be a positive. Yeah. The reality of the situation, I was busy as all hell, or had this going, or I was doing this came up. And like you said, how many times do you go to immediately, oh my God, what's going on? Or we go to the worst, and it's not. I mean, honestly, that's what causes me the greatest anxiety, right? I think that's what gets most people is the unknown. For sure. Because when you have the unknown, there's no reality. So it's all perception. And that's where perception gets dangerous, is because you create it. And it's so much easier, because I feel like a lot of times, especially if you're somebody who is open and you talk to people, you're very outgoing, let's say, you're going to have a lot of relationships, meaning, I'm not talking, it doesn't have to be an intimate relationship, a friendship, any type of relationship. So you're going to be exposed, to a lot of poor examples of that, probably more so than the good ones. You know, like you don't have a lot of people that have 150 friends that you could call at any moment and they're going to show up on a drop of a dime. Usually that's 4 to 5. So for me, how many people do I come in contact with where I got 4 or 5 people in my life over the last 30 years that I know I call today, no matter what they're doing, what state they're in, they're going to be at my side. So the point is I think we get so conditioned with negative experience through relationship that as human beings, we allow that habit to create our reality, because when you don't have a reality, you have to come up with one, right? You can't just sit in the unknown. At least I can't. So I usually create one. And when it's my perception, it's not usually the best one. Because for me, I come from a world of prepare for the worst. And if it's better, well.
Well, I think that's, I think a lot of people are there, and I think that's the danger in it.
That's where I run into with like the business stuff of like, I think my first gut reaction to things is, and a lot of it has to, we talked about past ups and downs and what, I went through that, whatever, crash in 08 or whatever it was. So always in the back of my head is like, okay, great, business is excelling, but there's a point in my life where it just stopped one day and that could happen again. And sometimes I fixate on that and it hinders my growth in business, and that's not the true perception of where we're at in life right now. And my business is structured far differently than it was then, and I have to kind of reel back and realize that. But sometimes you kind of take yourself down that negative rabbit hole too far, and then it's a lot of work to get back.
Right.
So and I know you guys go through that. It's the same kind of like up and down, and even more so than I do, and I don't know how you do it, honestly, sometimes, because it's very difficult to just kind of keep it even and positive.
I don't know how he does it and still has all the color in his hair. I'm substantially younger and I'm gray as all hell.
I would say self-sabotage is probably one of the biggest reasons really why I wanted to even bring up this topic, because, a lot of times we do that, including myself, that is where, and it's not just Buddhism, it's really most Eastern faiths or Eastern philosophies, Taoism, Confucianism, are really about take every day for what it is, the good and the bad, because tomorrow's going to be another one. They're very grounded in that, and that's also what I loved about it, was understanding that today could be shit, tomorrow could be better. Yeah. Let today end where it's at, learn what you're going to learn from it, and move on from it, and go in tomorrow, because tomorrow could be completely different. And, anybody who's old enough to be listening to this or watching it has been there. Everybody's had super low lows and everybody's had some highs. So it's not like we're talking about a foreign concept. And that's going to perception is reality. If you're that person where you're like, life has never been good for me, you're kidding yourself. Yeah. You're full of it. Yep. You're not being honest with yourself. You're being a drama queen. Martyr. And you're being a martyr. I mean, I've talked to some people that have been through some shit. And I've personally been through some shit in my life. And as wild of a ride my life has been, there's been people I've talked to like, damn, right. I thought I'd been through it. You've really been through it, and they've had good days, and I'm talking about people who've been living on the streets for 20 years, 30 years, and they could still talk to you about that great day they had where sun was out, people were nice, they got some food that day, or they were able to take a shower. Honestly, a lot of times those people are way more grounded in those good days.
Absolutely.
But my point is, you can get so lost in that perception that you're just, like you said earlier, you're waiting for that shoe to drop. And I will say, and you touched on that, and I talk about it quite a bit in my book, you know, when you really get creamed is when that's the one you don't forget. And it's kind of funny. So we were just talking about boxing, you know, and I used to box, and we were kind of talking about great boxers that we knew. And, you know, at my time, it was De La Hoya, who, from my eyes, my experience, was the best boxer I've ever seen. You know, he was just, technique was off the charts, still had power. So, you know, Mosley's great, but he's boring as shit. He's all defense, has no offense. I completely respect him as a boxer. De La Hoya blew him out the water, in my opinion, because he had both of those components.
Well, you have to entertain.
For sure. And it's just showing you're well-rounded. You have it all. You know, whereas Mayweather is a defensive genius. He's the most boring fighter in the world to watch from an offensive standpoint. Whereas De La Hoya still had phenomenal defense, but his offense was off the charts too. But the guy looked unbeatable. I mean, he was the golden boy. And then he lost to Trinidad. If you ever want to see a great fight, watch it. Felix Trinidad, De La Hoya. When you watch it, the first, and it's been a while, I want to say it was the first 10, 11 rounds, was literally a clinic in boxing. So if you ever want to learn how to box, it was literally technician clinic. And then he kind of stayed away from him for the last couple rounds, ended up losing the fight. Now, I'm sure there was a big part of him was like, man, I should have dug in a little bit more of those later rounds. That's why I lost. I'm sure a huge part of him is I got robbed, which he did. But moral of the story, he was never the same again. Like, he was still a great boxer, but he was never the same again. I mean, Tyson's a lot like that too. I mean, Tyson looked unbeatable. And then trainer dies, you go to jail, shit happens, you lose. And because we were talking about that specifically, it seems like in boxing, that first loss just gets, you just can't get it out of your head. You know, it just seems like you just can't let that go. And the reason why I'm mentioning it, it seems like that's similar in life. Perfect. Like, you know, when you take that knockout, and I'm talking to one that puts you out, you're out in a stretcher, you just are never the same again after that. And what I talked about in my book was, you know, for me, faith came in young, far from an easy life, definitely been through it, but I always knew I was going to be okay. Even if death, I was going to be okay. So either I'm going to make it through this or God's going to take me. Either way, I'm good. And I had complete and utter faith in that, you know, and because of that, I was always able to ride those tough times. And I was volunteering, and kid I was mentoring, and I mean, this poor kid came from sexually abused background, brother was involved in gangs, you know, they specifically set me up with him because he was kind of going in that direction towards gangs, pulled himself out of it, got his grades together, was a great basketball player. You know, they were playing ball. His buddy was flirting with some girl. Boyfriend didn't like it, took a shot at him, and, you know, my guy caught it in the head. And, you know, if that was the end of that story, that would be one thing, which would have been horrible. Well, he made it through it. You know, and honestly, I hadn't seen him after that. I don't know if he walked again after that or what, but definitely wasn't playing basketball again or any of that stuff. And I've seen a lot of that throughout my life, know people that kind of stuff happened to, but it was really, for the first time, was just like, what am I doing? You know, what's the point of this?
Right.
So why am I trying to help people? Why am I trying to impact? Why am I trying to do this when, you know, I can't stop that?
Yeah.
Like, I can't stop bullets. And it hurts so freaking bad, and I'm embarrassed to say it. And I'll never forget because of my background, he wanted retaliation. And I was like, it's a kid. It was literally like a 12-year-old kid, I think, that did it. It was 11 or 12 at that time. And I'm like, you got to tell the police who this kid is if you know who it is, which on a street level, you never do.
Right.
And so he was kind of broken that was the advice I gave him. I was kind of broken that this even happened to him and I couldn't do anything about it. Like, what was I going to go shoot 11-year-old because,
right,
because of this happened? I'm going to go beat up an 11-year-old? Like, none of this stuff can happen. Like, my hands were literally tied. And it destroyed me. And more just for my faith was that knockout punch. Was that, are you sure everything's going to be all right? Because you didn't see that shit coming. When you kind of looked at the evolution of that relationship, he was growing, getting better and better and better, stopped getting into trouble, stopped messing around, took studies more. He had like that, it looked like, he was going to have that fairy tale story. Like, I'm going to be watching this great kid be playing in NBA, overcome all that horribleness that he had been through, and then shot in the head. And you're like, WTF, God? What's up with that shit? And I just was never able to. I still got faith again. Not that I lost my faith, but it was definitely, the bell was rung on it. I never had it the same way. I never walked into the ring again thinking, you can't beat me. You don't have a chance.
Right.
There was always that, you can't beat me. But shit does happen.
Right.
And, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that was just the reality for me after that happened. And I never, just to your point, I never shook that loss. Like, I never, as great as things are, I'm never completely sold on it. And when things are bad, I'm never completely sold on it, but I'll never forget that knockout.
The only benefit for me in my scenario is when things are bad, they're never that bad. So having been through it, it does just, sweep your feet out from underneath you, and it is that WTF moment. But now when I do hang on it does hinder me from moving forward, and I'm aware of it, and I try and put it in the past. But even when things are bad, because there is that yin and yang, at least it's like, well, it's not as bad as it was in 08, and for you, like, well, things are bad, but it's not shot in the head bad, like, as terrible as that is to say.
No, for sure.
There's that end of the perception of being able to control that, again, for the mind is so powerful, and it can lead you wherever, and learning when to stop yourself from just letting a snowball build of anxiety or depression or whatever it's crucial. But it's something, even for me lately, that I've just kind of been doing, like, well, if things go south, they're not going to go that far south. I've done things differently to protect myself.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think the hardest thing about perception and reality is accepting the reality. Accepting the reality and doing what needs to be done. Yeah. The perception is obviously easier because it's a perception. It's not a fact. So when reality becomes reality, the hardest thing to do is to accept it. And that's something I struggle with. And like I said, I pride myself in understanding perception versus reality. I think I've got a pretty good grasp on it. And I still struggle with the repercussions of not respecting reality,
For sure. And I think that, where you really need to be at, and I struggle with, is just minimally acknowledging that that's what's going on. That I have a perception, this is my reality, and what's the healthiest decision for me to make. I run into that quite a bit. It could be a friendship, it could be work, where I'm like, okay, this is my perception, this is the reality of it. I'm in a position in my career where I can go anywhere. I've been successful, I've accomplished a lot, made a name for myself, that and I get like that because of the up and downness of it, where I'm like, you know what? I don't need this shit. I could be here, I could be there, I could be making this, I could be making that. You know, and that's the perception of that. And that's reality. I mean, that's just a fact.
That's dangerous too. I mean, it's dangerous.
It is. And that's, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that goes the same way in a relationship, could go in the same way in a friendship. I'm not somebody, you know, we talked about it before. God has blessed me. God has blessed you. I'm no better or no worse than you. So that same shit goes in a relationship. You know, make no mistake about it. You could be replaceable. Make no mistake about it in a friendship. You could be replaceable. There's other people that want to be my friend. There's other women who want to go out with me. That's super healthy when you're stable.
Yeah.
And your perception isn't blowing out your reality.
Yeah.
It can, to your point, could be really dangerous when you're self-sabotaging and, number one, you know, life isn't meant to be. So I read the Gospels plenty of times. Nowhere did Jesus say, you know what, guys, I promise you, you believe in me and you trust me, every day of your life is going to be great. Not in there. So that promise was never made. Where we get that from, or where our want is for that, didn't come from him or God. And you know, not to be a downer, the Old Testament isn't any more fulfilling, and every day of your life is going to be joy. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here for a reason. I'm absolutely, completely confident that a big reason of that is our evolution, is our growth. And like we talked about earlier, you cannot have growth if you don't have resistance. I mean, it's just part of it. It's not always great. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes people you love die. Sometimes a kid that you adore gets shot in the head. Sometimes your business goes to shit. You know, sometimes you work your ass off to get to a position and it blows up in your face. I mean, all of those things are growth. When we talk about a lot in the middle, it's that, oh shit, you know, all right, well, is this where I'm at? You know, for you, you're to a point. I mean, I remember specifically talking about relationships and being like, dude, it's inevitable. You're gonna find what you're looking for. God's gonna bless you with it. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. You know, what is kind of sucks about it when you're that guy, and you were always great about it, but people do not want to hear that shit from you. No. So as much as I'm honest, forthright with people, you know, people get very upset.
Sure.
Both good. I mean, I've had the opposite. Well, actually, you too, where relationships and you're like, man, I really wanted that to work. And I was like, I did not. That was garbage. It was a freaking hellfire. You had no hope.
Praise Jesus.
And literally.
There were multiple times where I think conversations with you were like, thank God. Yeah. Like,
you just want to slap him too. You're like, this mother.
Truthful and blunt and just like, thank God, huh, bro? That didn't work. And you're like, what the fuck, man?
I want to hear that shit from you. You're console me, bro. Weep a little bit.
Right.
And I will say, I mean, exactly that. And like I said, Brad always, you know, took it like a champ. But I've had a lot of people will get, even with death, will get really upset with me. Like, you know, hey, bro, a little compassion, man. And, you know, my such and such just passed, and I'm like, they're moved on. They're into better and greater things. I completely understand why you miss them, and selfishly you want them still here and all that. I wholeheartedly do, but don't say you feel sorry for them. Like, feel sorry for what? Like, they went on to better things. But in those scenarios, it's just, and that's why we talk about it, you know, where perception becomes your reality. It's so crystal clear to me that it's a joyous occasion. that's not, and I was fully aware, hurt your feelings, you know, you're taking a couple losses, you so desperately want that to work and it doesn't. And I completely acknowledge all of that. It still doesn't change the reality that it was shit. And you had no chance of it working out the way you wanted to. You know, that's what's really tough with that. And when you're speaking to someone, even when people are talking to me about stuff that's going on in my life, at the end of the day, I'm blessed. I have great friends, great wife, great people that I know. Like I said, in my business, made a name for myself. I'm in a position where, God forbid, things didn't work out for me where I'm at. There's plenty of opportunity out there. But I still get the woe was me's. Like, why do I got to deal with this all the time? This is some bullshit. Why can't things be more stable? All of that. I literally just went through it. And like we were talking about with perception versus reality, I really think the crux of it is you really have to be honest with yourself. Is it worth it? You know, whatever you're going through, be it a relationship, a job, a marriage, you know, hobby, whatever, is it worth? I remember I have a great friend. Remember Brad?
Yeah.
In service? He's learning to play guitar.
No kidding.
Yeah, so he's been blowing me up about it, talking about it. I remember being like, this is wizardry. I'm not going to learn how to play. Like, it's just not capable. Like, my brain don't operate that way. And that's kind of what I was telling him. Like, because I remember about 5-6 months in, I'm like, forget it. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So I was like, dude, whatever you do, just keep going after that, because you're going to hit that wall, and then all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh shit, I actually did get better.
It just makes sense out of the blue. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah.
You know, and that's the hard, you know, that perception in that moment is, this is impossible.
Oh, it's the worst.
Can't do it. This is literally impossible.
The world is falling.
Right. World is falling. You know, it's out to get me. And the real reason why we're talking about this, number one, we kind of been leading it up to it with different things, but we are in a society that is beating the ever-living shit out of you with their perceptions. I mean, it is just kicking the ever-living crap out of you with perceptions, be it social media, be it what you're seeing on TV, movies, you know, real life stories, all this stuff. It's just constantly showing you, hey, this is what you should think. This is what you should take from this. You know, you have, you know, politics. You should believe this. You should believe that. We're just in a constant, this is who God is. We just talked about last episode. This is who God is. This is who Jesus is. You know, we're constantly being blasted with, this is what your perception of things should be.
Yeah.
You know, what I can say is we're all made from the same creator. That reality is in the seed of us. It's in the essence, the soul of us. You know, I think what you really need to constantly be striving for is getting as honest and as close to that as you possibly can. And I will say, when you can calm all that down, those answers are there. You know, it never ended for me. I mean, we literally talked about how, you know, Jesus couldn't make everybody walk, make everybody see. So we know that shitty things happen in this world. Just like that young kid getting shot in the head. It's just, you're like, that's not supposed to happen in this story.
Sure. This
is supposed to be that great story where, you know, he lives happily ever after and lives a beautiful life. You know, this is bullshit. I want to exchange this book for another one, rewrite this, give it out, because this is bullshit.
Right.
Because we just don't want that ever to happen to us.
Yeah.
It's not like we're naive or we don't understand it happens. We read about shit every day. Just when it happens to us, we're just like,
WTF.
Right. This is bullshit.
Yep.
You know, I don't know what else you guys want to add.
No, I mean, I think we could beat it to death with perception versus reality. You know, I mean, I think the best advice I could give, and it's something I still struggle with, is, you know, figure out a way to accept the reality, you know, because that's one thing that's never going to change.
Right.
I mean, your perception of it could, but eventually you're going to have to deal with it. And it's realities aren't always set in stone. It's just, you know, accepting a reality that you're currently living in, because you can't move forward until you have an idea of where you're at.
Right.
You know, don't let yourself live too long in the perceptions.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to the relationship side of perception and reality, I think for so long I had this perception of this relationship, and people would come in and out of my life, and I would, you know, you'd almost try and force it. And, you know, thankfully it didn't work. The reality is the right person did come along. Mm-hmm. It did work. It just took a little bit to get there.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's that don't give up, and don't try and go too far down one extreme versus the other. Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I have to take it myself, the absolute best advice I can give anyone on this particular subject is it's stopping any of that kind of talk. Mm-hmm. So instead of, you know, this is the reality of this is the reality of that, this is how people are, this is how this thing is, this is my perception.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So this is my perception of this situation. This is my perception of Alex. This is my perception of Brad. This is my perception of the world. This is my perception of God. You know, because even taking the concreteness of it, of reality, you know, kind of makes you slow down a little bit, because just saying this is my perception makes you stop for a second and say, okay, so this is how I see this.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's human nature, but at least if you can slow that down to this is how I see this, it's kind of the beginning of, okay, well, this is how I see this. Someone else may see it differently. And if they do, then they might have a valid point of why that might not be complete reality, because it's not reality to them.
Right.
And might be able to help you find a compromise in that where, you know, that perception changes. I mean, that's the best advice I can give on that.
It's great advice.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll check you guys on the next one. And please don't stop. Share, like, subscribe.
Comment.
Tell your friends.
That's right.
And we'll check you guys on the next one.
Yep. Thank you, guys.